Have you ever stayed at your notes for hours and thought, why isn't this sticking? You're studying, you're trying, but somehow your brain just won't process things the way top students' brains seem to. Maybe you've seen those students, the ones who just get it. They don't seem stressed, they don't cram, yet they always perform at the highest level. It's frustrating, right? Here's what's interesting. It's not that they're smarter. It's that they think differently. And that difference, according to research from Harvard and other cognitive science studies, comes down to a set of specific, trainable thinking habits. So today, we're breaking down 6 science-backed thinking habits that Harvard students use and how you can adopt them, one by one. No fancy IQ, no magical genes, just deliberate ways of thinking that anyone can build. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your brain sometimes fights learning, how top students approach problems completely differently, and 6 practical mental shifts you can start using today to think, learn, and remember like a high-performing student. Let's start with the first one, and it's something you might be doing wrong every day without realizing it. When most people study, they try to memorize information. Harvard students, and strong thinkers in general, do something else. They turn information into questions. Instead of asking, what is photosynthesis? They ask, why does a plant even need photosynthesis? That why activates curiosity, and curiosity lights up parts of your brain linked to deeper memory and understanding. A Harvard learning researcher once said, the quality of your learning depends on the quality of your questions. So when you're reading or revising, pause and turn every key fact into a question. Then close the book and try answering it, out loud, in your own words. It feels simple, but it's powerful, because the brain is a problem-solving organ. When you give it a question, it wakes up. When you feed it answers passively, it zones out. I used to highlight entire pages of my textbook, yellow everywhere, but almost nothing stuck. The moment I started turning notes into questions, everything changed. My notes got shorter, my recall stronger. So next time you study, don't just read. Question everything. Let's be honest, we often study for results, a grade, a test, a job. But top students, they focus on the process, not just the product. This comes from research on something called the growth mindset, popularized at Stanford but deeply practiced in Harvard's academic culture. Instead of asking, did I get this right? They ask, what did I learn from getting it wrong? It's a subtle but radical shift. Because when you chase outcomes, you judge yourself. When you chase process, you improve yourself. Think of it like this. You can't control the grade, but you can control your focus, your schedule, your method of review. And when you consistently refine that process, the results follow, naturally. A friend of mine in university used to rewrite every mistake she made on a test, not to punish herself, but to understand her thought process. By the next exam, she wasn't studying harder, she was studying smarter. So the next time you feel disappointed in your results, ask yourself, am I judging my product or improving my process? One of the biggest traps in studying is mistaking familiarity for understanding. You read something, it looks familiar, and you think, yeah, I know this. But when you try to explain it, you freeze. Harvard students often apply something called the Feynman technique, named after Nobel-winning physicist Richard Feynman. It's brutally simple. Take any concept and explain it as if you're teaching it to a 10-year-old. When you can't explain it simply, it means your understanding has holes. This method forces you to think in layers, from complex to simple, which builds clarity. Try it with one of your hardest topics tonight. Grab a sheet of paper, write the idea at the top, and then explain it in the simplest terms possible. Where you stumble, that's where you need to go back and study. It feels uncomfortable at first, but discomfort is actually the signal of real learning. Because if it's easy, you're probably not stretching your brain. We've all heard of spaced repetition for memorizing facts. But here's a twist. Harvard students also space out their thinking sessions. Instead of grinding for 5 hours straight, they'll study, walk, come back later, reflect, then revisit the concept again. This technique is backed by cognitive science. Your brain consolidates ideas while resting, especially during downtime. In other words, when you step away from a problem, your subconscious keeps working on it. It's called incubation, and it's why some of your best insights come in the shower or during a walk. When I was cramming all night before exams, I felt productive, but my recall dropped. When I broke sessions into chunks, 50 minutes on, 10 off, I understood twice as much with half the effort. So, stop thinking that rest equals laziness. Strategic rest is part of intelligent effort. You've probably heard advice like believe in yourself or visualize success. And sure, optimism helps, but science shows that blind positivity can actually backfire. Harvard psychologists teach something called mental contrasting. Here's how it works. You imagine your desired future and the obstacles that could stop you. Then you make a plan for those obstacles. For example, instead of thinking, I'll study every night, you think, I'll study every night, but if I feel tired after work, I'll at least do one 20-minute review. That small pre-commitment changes everything, because you're training your brain for reality, not fantasy. The top students don't rely on motivation. They design for resistance. They think ahead of their weakest self. So don't just dream the result. Picture the roadblocks and plan around them. Here's one habit that almost no one talks about. Harvard students reflect intentionally after learning. After finishing a lecture or study session, they'll spend 5 minutes asking, what did I actually learn? Where did I struggle? What could I do differently next time? This is called metacognition, thinking about your thinking. It's one of the strongest predictors of academic performance. When you reflect, you consolidate your knowledge, catch your blind spots, and refine your strategy. Without reflection, you're repeating the same effort, not improving it. I started journaling one line after every study session. What worked? What didn't? It sounds tiny, but over months, it changed my habits completely. So here's your challenge. After your next study block, write down one thing you understood better and one thing you'd approach differently. That's all. Reflection compounds. When you reflect, before you go you consolidate your knowledge. You don't need to master all 6 habits and refine your strategy. Trying to change everything overnight, you're repeating the same effort. Pick one habit that feels doable. I started journaling one line after every study session. Journaling. What worked? And do it for a week. What didn't? Consistency beats intensity, but over months, single time. It changed my habits completely. Don't expect instant transformation. So here's your challenge. Your brain takes after your next study block. Write down one thing you understood learning better feels and one thing you'd approach differently. And that's more natural. Reflection compounds. These habits aren't about perfection. They're about progressive improvement. Let's quickly recap the 6 habits. 1. Think in questions, not answers. Curiosity drives memory and understanding. 2. Focus on process over product. Growth mindset leads to steady improvement. 3. Use the Feynman technique. If you can't teach it simply, you don't fully understand it. 4. Space your thinking. Let your brain rest and connect ideas subconsciously. 5. Practice mental contrast. Visualize success and prepare for obstacles. 6. Reflect after learning. Awareness multiplies growth. Each of these habits rewires the way you think, not overnight, but over time. The truth is, Harvard students don't have secret genes. They just use their brains intentionally. And now you can, too. Start with one of these habits today. Try explaining your topic like